is a sigma. We have rho and sigma, and they basically are weights on the weights that the dictator places on the recipient's outcomes, right? So how big of a factor are your outcomes in my utility function? And so what we have here is player 2, the dictator's utility function, as a function of the outcomes, the payoffs, material payoffs to players 1 and 2, and these parameters are the weight that they put on player 1, the other player, depending upon whether they're ahead or behind. Okay? So this is 2 is ahead, x2 is greater than x1, or I should say 2 will come out ahead, right, as a result of the distribution. And then this is 2 is behind, or 2 will come out behind. So rho is how much I care about your outcomes when I'm going to come out ahead. As long as I come out ahead, sure, fine, I'll care about you a little bit. I'll express some altruism. Sigma is how much I care about you if the distribution I'm being asked to make is going to put me behind. Really? I should care about your outcomes if you're going to be ahead of me? Doesn't that put you in the 1%? Shouldn't I be linking arms with somebody else who's behind? Okay. So, it's intuitive, at least I think maybe in this society, to guess that rho is bigger than sigma, that I'm more altruistic towards people I'm ahead of, right? So you might think of this as noblesse oblige. Well, I'm in the 1%, so of course I'm willing to be generous to those who are in the 99%. And then if I'm in the 99%, if I see somebody in the 1% drowning, I might step aside from what I'm doing to help them out, right, which would be a sigma at least slightly bigger than 0. But I'm not going to be as generous towards somebody who's ahead of me in the race, in the distribution, than someone who's behind me. Does that make sense? You see how these parameters catch that? Right, so basically that's rho is saying I care about you, sigma is saying I care about you, I still care about you, sigma greater than 0 is saying I still care about you a little bit if I'm ahead, but this is saying I don't care about you as much if you're winning. And then of course there's a possibility that sigma is actually less than 0 for some people or in some situations, which is if I'm behind, I want to drag you down. Okay? And that is what clever pundits and politicians refer to as class warfare. Right? Somehow, if rho is less than 0, right, which means when I'm ahead I still want to hammer you down, somehow that's not interpreted as class warfare in this society. That's just interpreted as rational self-interest. So who gets accused of class warfare is a very interesting thing to notice. Okay, so here's an example, right, of sigma being less than 0. So let's suppose rho is 1/2. I treat you and me as equal. Okay? If I'm ahead, I treat you and me as equal. And then let's say sigma is negative 1/3. Right? So if I'm behind, I kind of want to punish you a bit, or I want to drag you down. And suppose we have a dictator choosing between 0, 0, and 9, 1. Now, what's implicit here is that who's ahead and who's behind is defined by the outcome of the thing I choose. So if I choose 9, 1, right, I'm the dictator, I'm person 2. So if I choose 9, 1, I'm going to come out way behind, at least in this particular setting, right? So to evaluate the 0, 0 choice, right, I'm neither ahead nor behind, so it doesn't actually matter what sigma and rho are, because x1 and x2 are both 0. Okay, so obviously the utility of that is 0. And then if I choose 9, 1, right, I multiply the 9 by negative 1/3. That gives me this utility to give you money if it leaves me behind. And then I put a 4/3. That's 1 minus negative 1/3. I care about me even more than I cared about me before. And that weighted sum is negative 5/3. So basically, this is someone who's they're not giving up $1 to punish somebody for giving them an unfair split. They're basically just saying, if I'm faced with only 2 ways to split, well, and see, this is a case where it's not really about splitting a pie anymore. If the only choice I can make on splitting a $10 pie is to have me come out way behind, I'd rather throw both pieces of the pie into the compost from the get-go, because I just don't want you coming ahead like that. Okay. And so again, sort of, if that's what's going on, is that for some people they just really hate being behind, no matter how they wound up being behind, even if it's by their own choice, they hate winding up behind. That might be one explanation for why we wind up seeing rejection of low offers in the ultimate game. It's not that I'm punishing you; it's just that I don't want to come out behind. Okay. So that could be why people. Another thing you see in the ultimate game is that people very seldom give more than half. Right. So if people seldom give more than half and offers of less than half typically get rejected, that could all be explained by simply sigma is less than 0. Nobody wants to come out behind. Right. Okay, so let's think about some categorizations that we might capture by just setting different parameters into these parameters in different ranges. Before I move forward, here on difference aversion, this is a typo. That's supposed to be a sigma. I apologize for that. Okay, so how do different parameter values translate into different kinds of distributional preferences? If rho and sigma are both 0, right, that says I never care about you. Now I'm just purely self-interested. That's pretty obvious. If we set rho equal to 1 and sigma equal to 0, I should probably draw this model on the board so I can point to it. If rho is equal to 1 and sigma is equal to 0, so that means that when I'm ahead, all I care about is you. And when I'm behind, all I care about is me. Okay? Now, if you think about it in terms of me versus you, that's a little hard to comprehend. But if you think about it in terms of disinterested preferences, this is actually very straightforward. Basically, this says all I care about is whoever's behind. Right? What I care about actually is not the distribution, but simply, how much what's the bottom? Show me the lowest 1% of the distribution. I'm actually indifferent over who gets what above that. Any distribution that doesn't help out, any social policy that doesn't help out the lowest person in the distribution is meaningless to me. Okay? So this is referred to somewhat spuriously as Rawlsian social preferences after a philosopher named John Rawls. It's a ham-fisted representation of what Rawls actually believed, but in economics that's what we mean by somebody who cares only about the minimum outcome in any distributional choice. Okay? And you can think of that as someone whose preferences, this should be familiar, between outcomes for person 1 and person 2, are what are called Leontief, or maxi-min, right? You're just trying to maximize the minimums. So this distribution is preferred to that distribution, but if you increase the outcome for person 1 without increasing the outcome for person 2, it doesn't make me any happier. Okay? what about this? What if we have rho and sigma both between 0 and sigma a little bit bigger than rho? So this went back to the last slide. This is sort of the intuitive idea that I'm willing to be more generous towards you if I'm ahead, but if I'm behind, I still want to be a little bit generous to you. I don't want to drag you down. Okay? And the term that we're going to give to that is simply social welfare preferences. I care about everybody, but I'm a little bit more concerned about in general about myself and others, right? This doesn't actually say that. That would mean that they're both below 1/2. It simply means that I care a little bit more about the person who's behind. I'm okay with there being inequality, right? I'm okay with there being winners and losers. But in general, I kind of would prefer to give up something to help other people, even if I'm behind in the distribution. And then finally, we could just take that same concept and push it a little bit further and say, what if rho is bigger than sigma, but sigma is negative? This is someone who just doesn't like there to be differences, right? Which is somewhat different than somebody who only cares about the minimum. Right? Somebody who just doesn't. It's like, I'd rather we all be poorer than one of us be ahead of the other. Okay? Which is not what this says. This says, I don't care if you're ahead of me. I only care about the person who's behind. Right? The person who cares about difference aversion would say, no, this is making me worse off. I'm not indifferent to this person being made better off without me being made better off. I dislike that. Okay. And then what happens is that people go and do these just endless rounds of lab tests of different setups with different numbers to try to tease apart what sigma is, what rho is, and so forth. And the paper that I assigned, which is very long, most of the paper is just like long lists of different games with different outcomes and the results of those outcomes, and then this sort of, not rambling, but long discussion about what those different games tell us about these parameters. It's easy reading and it's quite enjoyable. So here's sort of the stylized facts. On sigma, how do I feel about other people when I'm ahead? Okay? Most subjects seem to have a positive, sorry, not sigma, rho. Most subjects have a positive rho. When they're ahead, they're willing to sacrifice some money, right? So, for example, give up $1 so the other person can get 3. When I'm ahead, I'll make that sacrifice, okay? And then a minority are even willing to give up $2 so that you can get 1. As long as I'm ahead, sure, okay? Average split when splitting an allocation 20 to 25, right, which is less, notice, than in the ultimatum game. In the ultimatum game, what we saw is the average is usually sort of between 40 and 50. If there's no threat of rejection, it goes down, but it doesn't go down to 0, okay? And so generally estimates of rho come out, in sort of population averages of rho come out at about 0.4. What about sigma? How do people feel when they're behind? So it looks like stylized fact 10 to 20% have a sigma negative enough to sacrifice a non-trivial amount in order to hurt somebody. Right? Costlessly hurting someone who's ahead, we wouldn't necessarily make a lot of fuss about that. But if I'm actually willing to give up some of my payoff in order to not come out as far behind, that suggests that my sigma is less than 0. And then it says 30% are willing to sacrifice to help a recipient who's ahead. I'm about to have a Herman Cain moment because I can't quite remember what that means. Did you guys see this? Herman Cain didn't. That's embarrassing. Poor Herman Cain. Couldn't answer a question about our policy in Libya. 30% are willing to sacrifice to help a recipient who is ahead. What does this mean? I need one of my handlers. It drives me nuts and I can't understand things. Okay, come on. So people who are whispering. What does it mean in terms of sigma and rho? What does it mean in terms of sigma? That it's more than 0. Right, sorry. Duh. Okay. So if I'm willing to sacrifice to help a recipient who is ahead, right, so this simply means sigma is positive. So this is sort of 10 to 20% for whom sigma is negative, about 30% for whom sigma is positive. And then overall, the stylized fact seems to be that saying that when a person is behind, they stop really caring about the other person one way or another is roughly not a bad assumption. What that really says is here's 30% for whom sigma is somewhat positive, here's 10 to 20% for whom sigma is negative, and for the rest, sigma is approximately 0, right? And maybe that's the plurality or even the slight majority of people. Okay. So what signs of generosity do we see? Well, we've seen already in the dictator game, people seem to be fairly generous when there are absolutely no consequences for being stingy. In this country, Americans are famous among industrialized societies. Americans are famous for giving vast sums of money to charity, right? Which may be partly because our government doesn't. I don't know, but people are very generous when there's a disaster. You get floods, huge amounts of money come out of Americans' pockets and go to places like, well, this time not so much in Somalia, but historically to the Horn of Africa, to tsunami victims, you name it. Charitable giving amounts to about 2% of GDP. That's a very, very big number. Yeah. A caveat: about half of that goes to people's church. Okay? So depending on what church you go to, it's a little unclear whether that's altruism or you're just paying a fee for service, right? If you don't give money to the church, as churchgoers are reminded this time of year, if you don't give money to the church, you may not be churched. So it's not clear how much of that is altruism, but clearly a chunk of it is. And then if we counted volunteering and other hard-to-measure contributions, it'd be more. I like this little fact. So there was a thing in the news last year. The Carnegie Hero Fund gives out prizes to people who do these sort of newsworthy things like leaping into the river to save a child, whatever. And it turns out that over time they've actually had to start raising their criteria for who gets the award because there's more and more people behaving in this kind of selfless, self-sacrificial way. Okay, so this all seems to suggest that on balance, at least Americans are fairly generous. But now we're going to shift from purely distributional preferences to talking about some of these other psychological and sociological factors that affect that sort of muddy the evidence. Okay. Recent research on social preferences suggests that motives may be more nuanced than simple distributional preferences, and that people's motivations for generosity may be a little bit, for what looks like generosity for giving, may be a little bit less heroic than they seem. So a motivating example. It's been pointed out that there's this strategy that a lot of charitable organizations use, which is sort of having different categories of giving, right? And then publishing who's in the different categories in their annual report, or if you go to the opera, right? So in the back of the program, there'll be here's all of our donors by category. So here's the Pacific Film Archive. You have the Curators Forum, which is people who give between $5,000 and $10,000. The Directors Table, the International Fellows for people who go above $25,000, right? So you read through this, you immediately figure out how these terms map onto social status, and then you can go for the maximum social status you can afford, right? What we find is that the preponderance of donors, regardless of what range they're in, the preponderance of them are right at the bottom of the range, right? So if this was purely about distributional preferences, you shouldn't see that. Right? You should see people's preferences and income distributing their giving evenly throughout the range, or at least smoothly throughout the range. So it seems like people are sort of buying image here, right? Which is exactly why it's done. And my understanding is that it works. Okay? So this can be thought of as sort of preferences for beliefs. Right, we could ask the question, is what I care about that you believe that I'm very generous? I mean, I don't know, when I go to the opera, I don't spend a lot of time reading the part of the program that tells me who bought image. So maybe part of what's going on is that people want to believe in themselves as being generous. And it's like, well, I'd really like to give about $500 less than that, but oh, that's going to make me feel stingy. So it's a little unclear. Here is a version of the dictator game that Lazier, Malmondier, and Weber ran to try to separate out actual altruism, right, rho greater than 0, actual altruistic distributional preferences from face-saving concerns or preferences over other people's beliefs. Okay? So they did two different versions of the dictator game. The first was a standard game where they were given 10 euros to split between themselves and the recipient, and that was the end of the game. Okay? Totally standard dictator game. In the second one, before they were asked to make a distribution, they were given they were told, okay, you're about to be given a choice of whether or not you want to play a game. The game is a 10 euro dictator game, and that was explained. Now, before you play the game, you get to decide, do you want to play or not? You can just walk away with nothing. Okay? No, sorry, it wasn't walk away with nothing. That's right. It was, you can play this game for 10 euro split, or you can just walk away with 10 euros. Okay? So if the subject chose to participate in the game, then and only then was the recipient told, okay, there's a game being played in which your fate is being decided by a dictator. If instead the subject, the sort of potential dictator, chose not to participate, then she got the 10 euros and walked away, and the recipient was never told. Okay? Someone just took $10 out of your bank account, but you didn't find out about it. It's not quite that, but it's similar. What do purely distributional preferences predict? Okay? If you're a subject, now this is again stripping out, I don't care about what you think of me, I don't have to worry about whether you're going to punish me or not, only thinking about what, how I feel about your outcomes versus my outcomes. If my sigma, if my rho is greater than 0, rho and or sigma is greater than 0, which means that I want to give some money to the other person, then I should have, right, strictly no motivation to choose to exit the game whatsoever, and it shouldn't affect how much I give in the game. And if I happen to be someone who's purely self-interested or has a, maybe rho is equal to 0, so I don't care about you when I'm ahead, and rho is maybe sigma is maybe 0 or negative, then I should be completely indifferent between entering the game or leaving the game. Right? If what I was going to do in the game was to give you nothing, in terms of pure outcomes, it doesn't matter whether I stay in the game or not. Okay? So first of all, first prediction is there's no positive motivation to exit the game at all. Some people might just randomly decide to exit the game because they're indifferent. But what we do know for sure is that in either case, whether people are altruistic or not, whether or not they enter the game shouldn't change the average amount given. Right? So if the only people who leave the game are people who aren't going to give anything anyway, it'll lower the average amount overall, but it shouldn't affect the average amount given by people who give more than 0. Because the people who give more than 0 shouldn't be exiting the game if the only thing they care about is outcomes, if we're only taking distributional preferences into account. Needless to say, it's not the case. Right? So in the first treatment where it was just a standard dictator game, people shared on average €1.87. Is it 100th of a euro is a cent? Is that right? Is that right? Who's here? I think it's a cent. Which is on the low side for the dictator game, but it's not terrible. Maybe Europeans aren't as generous, I don't know. But in the treatment, and this was the same people, right? Given the option in a different round to leave the game, the average for those who stayed in the game and gave something was only 58 cents. Okay? Then they did a situation where if you walked away from the game, you only got 9 euros. And still quite a lot of people were willing to do that. I'm willing to give up a buck in order to be able to walk away selfishly giving you nothing and have you not know about it. And then they sort of varied it so they could find out what was the indifference point where people would say, oh, no, I'm not willing to give up that much to save face. And it was basically people were willing to walk away with as little as €8.24. If you made them pay more, what is that? That's a $17.60. Sorry, it's a €1.76 fee for saving face. If you charge them more than that for saving face, they would say, no, let me just go in the game and I'll do my little thing. Right, why? Because they're willing to do that in public. They're willing to be as selfish as only giving €1.87 in public. So why would I pay a ton of money to hide from being seen as that selfish when I'm perfectly willing to be that selfish in public? So obviously possible explanation, subjects really want to be selfish, but they don't want to be seen as selfish, so there's something else entering into their utility functions besides outcomes. Although, this stuff tends to become a little bit endless. You could sort of argue that maybe what's really going on is that people know, okay, I'm a selfish person. If I enter this game, I'm going to do something selfish. It's not that I don't want you to see me as being selfish. It's that I don't want you to walk away feeling bad about the outcome. Oh, I got hosed. And I'm going to hose you even more by staying out of the game completely, but I'm not going to give you that bitter feeling. So maybe this is me being really altruistic towards the person that I know I'm instinctively going to hose. Could go, we don't know. I believe what's going on is that 58 cents is for people who, no, it doesn't. For people who stayed in the game, I believe that number is people who chose to stay in the game and didn't give 0. Right? You would expect the average to go down if the only people who left the game were people who were going to give 0. No, you would expect the average to go up. Right, so